Hello and welcome to another episode of Geared Toward Gear. My name is Sean and I am so glad you're here. Today we're taking a look at a new offering from Civivi called the Asticus. Yes, I said Asticus. It is one of the more unfortunately named knives that I've handled in a while. Don't know how that slipped through the marketing and advertising department, but it is called the Asticus, as in ass to kiss. And there it is. This knife goes for $55. It's again a new release from Civivi. It's been getting a lot of praise on Instagram that I've seen in the last probably 72 hours, and I was not thrilled with a couple things about this knife. It kind of checks all the standard Civivi boxes as far as consistency, quality control, execution, materials. All those things are good. There's nothing about this knife that's going to shock you positively or negatively, except maybe one thing negatively, which for me was kind of a deal breaker, unfortunately. But it is the Asticus, and we are going to talk about it. And you've probably all heard the famous quote from Nathan Hale. He said this in 1776. He said, "My only regret is that I have but one Asticus for my country." At least I think that's how it went. I'm almost certain that's what he said. So maybe that's where they got the inspiration for the name of this knife. I'm not entirely sure. So let's get the short version out of the way. Let us kind of give you the 60-second version. So if you're in a hurry, you can be on your way. So Civivi Asticus, price tag on this guy is $55. It is 8.8 inches in overall length with a 3.8 inch blade, 3.5 inch cutting edge. Your closed length is 5 inches. So definitely a large knife. It comes in at about 3.9 ounces. The blade steel is D2. It's deployed via thumb stud. It locks up via a liner lock. It runs on ball bearing washers, can be carried tip up, either right or left-handed. And it comes in a variety of colors. I chose OD green. It is also available in blue G10, black G10, natural JG10, and they also have a carbon fiber version that has Damascus blade steel, and that's going to set you back about $75. So about an extra $20 if you want to opt for the Damascus, although I think the carbon fiber looks kind of silly personally, so I went with the OD green. I think it looks great. I bought mine from knifejoy.com. I've come to really enjoy them lately because they ship their stuff out so freaking fast, and I appreciate that. So that's the short version, $55. D2 flipper from Civivi, and all the good things that we've come to love about Civivi are going to be true on this knife. And we'll get into what those things are and a little more detail starting right now. So first things first, let's put this guy on the scale just to make sure that I'm not lying to you about the weight. I think I said 3.9 ounces. I know it's under 4 ounces, so let's see if we can confirm that right quick. 3.9, I think. 3.9 on the dot. So under 4 ounces, not a lightweight knife, but for its size, it is not bad. Not bad at all. And also for its size, it's got a pretty slim profile, so it carries nicely in the pockets. So that is all good. Let's start with the blade. Let's talk about the blade a little bit. Actually, you know what? Before that, let's do a couple size comparisons. Let's do that instead. Let's start with the Civivi Shredder, one of my favorite Civivis of all time. And it's going to be maybe a half an inch shorter than the Asticus. So if you like the size of the Shredder, you'd probably be okay with the Asticus as well. It's got a little more on the rear end of the Asticus, but that's to be expected with a name like Asticus. Here is the backlash, maybe my all-time all-around favorite Civivi, and that's going to be about an inch shorter in overall length, and of course you're sacrificing blade length as well. So very, very much a large knife, I would say, coming in, just shy of 9 inches overall. If we compare it to something like the Civivi Elementum, obviously it will be dwarfed and look pretty darn tiny and goofy. So that's that. And then here's the Civivi Chronic. This is another kind of relatively new release. I don't know if I'll review it or not, but again, going to be quite a bit smaller. So that is that. So let's get into details on the blade. So the blade shape is a drop point, which at first glance it kind of looks like an upswept, almost like a Persian style, because the belly does sweep up pretty significantly. However, the spine actually does drop consistently from the tang all the way to the tip, so it is very much a drop point. It is a hollow ground blade, as most Civivis are, and it's ground just expertly at this price point. Nobody's doing hollow grinds this way. Civivi owns the hollow ground blade game in this price range, and even far above this price range for that matter. As I mentioned, the blade steel is D2, which we can see if we get really, really close. You can see it right there, and that is the only markings on this knife other than the Civivi logo right there on the handle scale. So again, the kind of sterile look that we've come to expect from Civivi without a whole lot of billboarding and all that stuff. So again, nothing real shocking so far. There is a choil of sorts. Call it a finger choil, call it a sharpening choil. For me and my extra large hands, it is not a finger choil. Not a big fan of choils these days because they tend to just not be big enough for my hands, and so I'd rather have more blade length. Same thing is true on the shredder. I can't use that, but that's going to be an anatomy thing more than anything else, and my anatomy does not allow for me to use that. So I just have a really big, nice sharpening choil. There's nothing wrong with that. So that is the blade. I think I mentioned the blade steel's D2, and the other thing to note about this hollow grind on this particular knife is that it's quite thin behind the edge, which is going to really lend itself to be a very great slicer. And I measured it as thin as like 16 thousandths, and I'll see if I can recreate that. Let's zero this guy out here and just show you how thin this blade stock is just behind the edge. And I literally mean just behind the sharpened cutting edge. If we measure the thickness of the stock here, if I can get, it's hard to do around a tripod. Let me see if I can get a good spot. Okay. 15.5. So 15.5 thousandths of an inch behind the edge. That's crazy stupid thin for a production knife. That's impressive. So good on you, Civivi, for having a kick-ass hollow grind that is super, super thin. For 55 bucks, nobody else is doing that, period. Good on you, Civivi, for that. So let's talk about the kind of mechanism, deployment, everything that's happening in this area here. So we've got a flipper. That's our deployment method. It's done beautifully. It also has a great detent, kind of a perfect detent, and it's just tuned so nicely that it's almost impossible, even if you try, to get this thing to fail. Like if I use a finger I don't normally use, like even it was slow, but it's still like it just makes its way out. So deploys nice and fast, locks up strong with a liner lock, locks up a bit early at 25%-ish, which is my preference actually, so I'm loving that. The lockup itself is strong, up and down, there's no lock rock. Side to side, we do have a little bit of blade play, but with a long knife like this, sometimes it's hard to distinguish blade play from blade flex, and in this case I think it's just a little bit of both, but not enough to concern me even a little bit, so no issues there. The actual mechanism inside here is going to be a ball bearing washer, so that's going to make it super smooth, and you know, the drop shutty action that people talk about, and that's pretty standard these days on Civivi knives. So again, nothing that you shouldn't kind of expect at this point from Civivi. So all good as far as the deployment, the action, the lockup, all good things. So let's move on to centering while we're here. Right down the center, which doesn't surprise me. Let's look at these other ones and see what these look like. Darn near perfect. Damn near perfect, if not perfect. Perfect. And surprise, surprise. They just know how to build knives, right? These are made by We Knife Company, is who owns Civivi. Made in the same factory. They know how to make knives. That's just kind of the long and short of it. So good things there. Let's look at the handle. So the handle is interesting in that the liners sit proud of the handle scale itself. And that is not typical, I guess, for Civivi. It is also true on the Elementum. If we look closely, you will see the same thing. The liners sit proud of the actual scale. So we have seen that before, but it's not super common, right? And that's where I kind of have an issue, which we'll talk a little more about here in a moment. But it is G10, and the quality of the G10 that they use is just excellent. I love the level of traction. For me, it's kind of perfect. It's that Goldilocks zone where it's not too aggressive, it's not too smooth. It really is, for my preference, pretty much perfect. The hardware we've got going on here is going to be a size T8 body screw, which I always appreciate T8 over T6. Same thing is true for your pivot screw. Your pocket clip screws will be size T6, so just take that for what it's worth. So that's what we're looking at as far as hardware. I've got one kind of minor preference gripe and then one kind of deal breaker actually with this knife. And let's start with my personal preference gripe. And that is, I just wish the pocket clip was satin and not black. Again, preference thing, I would love for it to match the liners and the blade. Like this pocket clip would be perfect on this knife, I think. Because it would match the liners, that kind of satin finish would look great. And again, here on the Blacklash, they should call it the Blacklash. The Backlash, this one's the blacked out version, has like a chrome pocket clip, which just doesn't make sense to me. So wish they would have done a satin clip, but that's just me. That may not be you. So let's stop talking about it. So what's the one deal breaker for me that's going to cause me to not carry this knife? It has to do with the liners and two major hotspots that just make it uncomfortable. And so let's start with the liner lock. Because the liners sit proud of the scale, your liner lock is sticking out a fair bit, right? Even on the Civivi Elementum, which does also have liners that are proud, the liner lock is pretty well recessed. There's just a bit sticking out. Same if we look at the Backlash, you're going to see just a little bit of the liner lock there. If we look at the Shredder, we should see something that looks about the same, just a little bit sticking out. But on this Asticus, you've got a whole lot sticking out. So when I get this in just kind of my natural grip, which is about right here, and I use any force whatsoever to make a cut, like going through cardboard, I just get a really uncomfortable hot spot right here. It's not going to cut my finger, make me cry and run to my mother, pain. It's not comfortable. And it just kind of digs in to my finger. And I don't love that. The other is, and actually probably more significantly, is right here where these liners are, right? Because I have no G10 to support my thumb. So I'm literally, unless I'm choked up and I put my thumb all the way on the blade, when I'm making a cut and pushing in this direction, again, like breaking down a cardboard box, for example, my thumb is digging into the liner. It's actually not touching the handle scales at all. And so what that results in is my thumb, the meat of it just digs into that channel between the two liners. And again, it just doesn't feel fantastic. And I would never choose that level of discomfort when I could choose this, or I could choose this, or any other, dozens of knives that I have. So it just wouldn't get used or carried. And so for that reason, that kind of makes it a deal breaker. So I'm not going to hang on to it personally. I will probably sell this knife or maybe give it away. But yeah, that was enough to actually kind of be a deal breaker, which surprised me because I guess when I first looked at the design, I thought, I don't know what I thought, but there was so much hype and praise for this knife in the last few days on Instagram that I kind of feel like maybe I'm the odd man out, the only one that's feeling this way about this knife. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts if you have this knife. Maybe you hold it a different way. Maybe the size of your hands is different. But for me, it's just, I can't find a grip that is comfortable unless I go out of my way to like get like a really meaty part of my finger on the liner and like really choke up. But then that's just unnatural for me. So I just want to be able to grab it naturally and use it and it not be uncomfortable. And that's just, I can't do it with this knife. So for me, the Asticus is a no-go. And yeah, that's just my honest opinion. So it's not always going to be a positive review. Having said that, like, again, the execution of the design was done flawlessly. I think the design itself was flawed in that I think they probably would have been better off doing contour G10 that eliminated these liners protruding from the scales. But as the design sits, they executed it perfectly, meaning it's constructed well, it's consistent, the quality control seems to be there, the functionality, the grind, like everything is done well. I just think it's a design thing as far as I'm concerned. So that's my thoughts on the Civivi Asticus. I'd love to hear your thoughts, just based on maybe what you've heard or seen of this knife, whether it be based on my feedback or your own personal experience. Love to hear that down in the comments, so please feel free to drop me a line down there. Again, I always appreciate you guys taking the time out of your day to watch these videos. It means a lot. So until next time, I will talk to you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.